Hello and welcome. This is 2020 Coaching Convos with me, Julie Crabb. And this is Case by Case, Series 5 of the podcast, which focuses on reflections with guest coaches from cases in their coaching practice. And in every episode, you can be sure, I know I say this every time, but you can be sure that we will uphold confidentiality in relation to our clients in our conversation. It's a really fundamental piece of our professional coaching practice and of our ethics and values. So you'll hear us sharing information about our coaching practice with clients, but none of this will be attributable in any way to individuals that we've worked with. So we're going to see what can be learned, and this might be from a single case study or perhaps from a specific type of technique or practice that the guest is keen to share and explore. And this week, my guest is someone in my current new coaching tribe, I'm calling them, as we work towards the International Coaching Federation credentialing. She's the founder of Laura Martin Coaching, and I'm going to quote from her website. She supports people who feel stressed, exhausted and burnt out, and who are ready to take action so they never experience burnout again. That sounds wonderful. So welcome, Laura Martin.
Hi, thank you very much, Julie. Thanks for having me. That was I've never been introduced like that before, so that's quite exciting.
It must be quite strange to hear back what you've written onto your website. Yes. Oh, so last time we met, you were struggling a bit with a cold and getting your head around TikTok. That's the two things I remembered from a conversation. So how are you doing today?
Good, thank you. Yes, no, I'm feeling better with the cold, and TikTok is actually, it's quite good fun. But, it's interesting when we kind of try new things and some of like maybe old patterns and old behaviours start again, like that kind of we'll probably talk about a little bit about kind of my history of being someone who pushed through. So it's interesting being able to apply your own medicine a little bit to kind of keep things on the straight and narrow. So I have been very good and boundaried about how much time I am going to give to TikTok, but it's an interesting world.
More about this later, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to having this conversation because I know that you really offer such a blended service in a way of somatic work and coaching and mentoring. And there's so many questions right there already. But yeah, you seem to have a very, very highly holistic approach. And I can see that you offered a tailored support. I think you've said that meets people, I love this, meets people exactly where they are and focuses on their well-being, family and career goals. That's lovely. And I'm also intrigued to hear about your one-to-one coach and Rebel Heart program. What a brilliant name for a program. That sounds great. Yes. But before we dive into that, let's focus, Laura, on the specific case that you're bringing. I'm really interested to know what we can learn in this situation. And I'm just going to kind of tell listeners and kind of remind us of the kind of things that might come out of this. So, let's see what we can find out about a client and their role in the coaching process, our coaching skills and techniques, or your coaching skills and techniques, your special and personalized style as a coach, because it's really peculiar to each and every one of us. And then if there are any kind of specific things that you think, this is worthy of mention, let's pull that out too. Okay. So yeah, could you give us the backstory to your particular case study that you're bringing?
So I think the reason why I chose this case study is because when I was thinking about it after we had our initial conversation, it kind of really begins to pull out the threads that I now bring together in that kind of holistic offer. And it's interesting when we are developing our coaching practice, just how much kind of following curiosity and following what is showing up for our clients can actually bring. So I started working with this client quite a few years ago now, when I was really initially training as a coach. So we're kind of one of my case studies. Now this person is an executive and had come to me to talk about issues with self-doubt and relationships in the workplace. So, as you do as a coach, we began by getting curious about what was going on for her, and she had a different ethnic background than I did. So it was a really, I'm so grateful actually to have this experience from the very beginning, because it took me down a pathway to really understand how kind of our context in terms of how we've been brought up, in terms of how we, our beliefs, the kind of stories that we've had as young children, how society reacts to us, all impact in different ways. And actually, it really helped me to solidify my the kind of non-interventionist role of a coach, in the fact that it's not about how I see the world. It's not about the context that I can understand. It's really about getting, curious about what that means for that person. So in terms of my kind of development as a coach, she was an absolute gift from the very beginning. And I did some work. I know you talk about kind of coaching tools, and one of the things that I would really recommend, there was a book called Diversity and Inclusion in Coaching by Salma Shah, I think it is, Shah, and it's got so many tools in it. And it talked, most people know about the Wheel of Life. And it's got a similar approach, but it talks about kind of context and experiences and families and things like that. And it brings, so it's not necessarily just about people with different ethnicities, but any type of background that might be different. And it really allowed us to explore it in a way that didn't bring any of my perspectives or perceptions to the conversation. It was really useful. So that was the kind of first learning in this journey that I had, that I was really grateful for this client for. And we began to understand, like, what are the patterns, what are the behaviours, what was showing up in the workplace. And, not to blow my own trumpet too much, but we could the coaching sessions, and, she felt like she had a really helpful set of tools that felt good to her, that she was going to be using and working with, as going forward. Fast forward kind of 18 months later, and I'd been on my own journey as a coach, but also kind of in my own personal development journey, because my background, the reason why I became a coach was because I'd suffered burnout. I'd worked for a very large organisation, well known in the UK, and for many different reasons, not just one, but for many different reasons, my kind of go to push through, keep going was no longer working. And what I know now is my body said stop. And I did a lot of work with a coach, and I did a lot of understanding about what those patterns were. But what I didn't actually do was the body work, which is what I'm going to talk about in a minute. So what really happened for me was that I then applied those same techniques to things like my training as a coach. So I looked for all the different tools, and I was gathering them all up, and I was looking for more and more, looking for that sensation of I had enough. And I really almost burnt out in my coach training. I really almost kind of, and that, it was interesting because you'll know yourself, we do tend to attract people who are very similar to us or have that similar trait. So I felt quite out of integrity, because I was telling people to do certain things and I was still running on turbocharge. So I'd gone on my own journey in this kind of a year and a half, where I discovered somatic coaching, which was a complete revelation to me. And I realized that while I had a lot more tools at my disposal and that I was able to use, working with my body really helped me apply those tools a lot more ease, because I wasn't working against this kind of sensation from my nervous system, which was telling me that I needed to work harder than everyone else, that I wasn't safe not to do that. So I'd done a lot of learning and development of my skills, which helped me as a coach, because then I was able to share that with clients. Anyway, this client came back to me 18 months later, kind of saying, can we start working again together? Because I know we had all these things and it's been really helpful, but actually I've stopped doing them, and it's harder. And what really saddened me is this person, who was an amazing, she was absolutely incredible, was blaming herself because she felt like, well, I'd worked with this coach and I'd been given all these tools. So what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Why can't I continue with this? Why is it not sustainable? So I was so delighted she came back, because we don't maybe always hear from clients that maybe have felt like they've not managed to keep things going. So she came back to me, which I thought was incredibly brave in itself. And then we started working with the somatic work. We started working with the breath. The toolkit that I've trained in uses touch as well, so some Thai medicines, a technique called Bowen therapy. And altogether it's called a trauma release method, and it works at different levels of the body. So you have coaching, somatic coaching, as well as the body work, but it allows the body to, it's a bit like the nervous system says that it is a fire alarm. And if you don't switch the fire alarm off, it's going to keep telling you to do the things that it keeps you safe. So this works with setting an intention, and, you know, as coaching, it does, you know, working with the client to understand what next, but it switches off that alarm at the same time, so that when they're trying to embed new behaviours, they've not got something driving them from internally saying, wait a minute, stop. And that's what I experienced myself. And it's interesting now, talking about TikTok's interesting, it's kind of how we started the conversation, is like I notice when new things come into my world, like, you know, my nervous system can sometimes interpret them as, you know, is this safe to what we need to, and I can get quite into that habit of, right, I need to go 100 miles an hour. But now I understand that. How does that feel in my body? What does that, you know, okay, that's okay. I can do some like somatic work to switch that alarm off, and then I can go back to, this is how I want to behave. So she had that experience of doing the somatic work. And we managed to release a lot of the patterns that we had identified previously, but she kind of felt were part of her, that were always going to be there, to actually mean that she just was able to kind of let them go and step into something that she didn't really believe was possible at the beginning, because I guess our identity is tied up in all of these musts and shoulds and learnings. So she was able to embed the work and have much more sustainable results, which feels much better to me to work in that way, because then we're not leaving people to maybe self-blame and feel potentially like there's something wrong with them, which, you know, I think is something that is a risk of self-development if we're not going to given the structure around us. So that's my case study.
Wow, that's amazing. I've written so much down from just you there. I wonder if we could just go back and just have a think through some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So, first off, I loved what you talked about in terms of curiosity. It's a word that's used a lot in coaching, isn't it? But when you were talking about it in the framework of working with someone who is of a different ethnic background, a totally different to your own, probably my own, and having to put our own maps of the world aside and try and understand from their perspective, not make presumptions, but just have new learning and new understandings. I think that's really, I can see how that was a really important experience. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that resource from, is it Salma Shah?
Yeah, well, I actually did look up the book because I thought people might want to see it. So it's diversity, inclusion and belonging and coaching.
That's one that's not on my shelf, so I'm gonna have a look that one up.
It's really accessible. I found it really practical. I think it says it's a practical guide, and it does what it says on the tin.
Brilliant. And I think it said so much about you, Laura, when you were talking about feeling grateful to the client. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, we kind of, there's a sense that in this relationship, yes, it's a partnership. And I don't always think of the client bringing something for me, but it's nice to be able to say, oh yeah, that was a serendipity that person was so different to me that I learnt from them too.
Yeah.
And then when you were talking about, what was it? It was about moving into burnout and feeling like you've just got to keep going. And it reminded me about how some of the things that really are our very positive qualities can become our nemesis, if you like. And I hit one of those myself when I was setting up the podcast, but I was so determined to get to grips with the technology, and and that determination became bloody mindedness in the end. I was just like banging my head up against the brick wall of, I will do this, not thinking actually there might be another piece of software that's a bit more friendly or another way around it. Yeah. So
yeah, I recognize that. It's that kind of like what was an adaptive thing at the time when we learned it as maybe children even, then becomes maladaptive, and that is definitely that we need to keep pushing through. We need to keep going.
yes, this is what has worked before. It should always work. It's like the habits that you were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So people who are not familiar with somatic coaching, I wonder if you could, especially if there are people who are like watching this and thinking, oh, I'd like to sort of experience some coaching. Could you talk us through what typical somatic coaching session might involve?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll talk from my kind of practice. I mean, obviously there'll be many people working in many different ways, but from my practice, it tends to be a bit of a longer session. So I tend to give 2-hour coaching sessions because it includes a bit of either breath work or body work. So the actual coaching, the kind of principles around somatic coaching is that we all have learnings and we kind of think about them in terms of our head, like what's the memory, what's the learning. But in reality, that learning is also held in our body. Mm-hmm. So it's, jargon wise, it's called a somatic imprint, but it's kind of, we know that our body communicates with us. So if you're feeling scared or anxious, then you probably recognize that kind of butterflies in the tummy type thing, or under pressure or sad, like you kind of recognize those sensations as emotions. So that's kind of how it works. They're held in your body, but your body then communicates that to your brain. So and it's just about really understanding what is going on. So instead of keeping ourselves right in our head and kind of almost dissociating or ignoring what's going on in our body, which is essentially what was doing for me. My head was telling me, you need to keep working, you need to keep going. My body was telling me something completely different, that I was unsafe, and it was, and I didn't interpret that at the time. So we work with a client. So it's about like, what does that feel like for you in your body? How does that make you feel? What are the sensations in your body? And begin to start unpicking, because sometimes these are very, very, very early parts of ourselves. They're younger parts of ourselves that have learned a lesson that's been adaptive, that's been important for us, when we were less powerful, as children, dependent on our caregivers. Maybe it was important for you to stay small and not speak your mind or whatever. But as an adult, that's maladaptive, because you're now in a career where you want to be able to confidently say what you want. But there's something about speaking out that's causing this bodily reaction. So it's about kind of unpicking that a little bit, understanding what's going on, not to kind of shame, not to make that wrong, because it's obviously had a really positive intention, and then work with the body. So that might be with the breath, that might be with touch, to then begin to support the body to release that, so that it no longer triggers. So say when you were going to go speak to your boss, that part of you that's saying, no, we don't do this isn't safe, just no longer triggers anymore. So that's what I mean about it can help make the things that we want to do easier, because if we keep keeping it on a kind of mindset level, then we're still pushing against that body that's telling us it's scary and wrong and unsafe. And it's an incredibly strong system, it's our survival system. But if we work with the survival system to meet it where it is, then that releases, so that we don't feel that fear anymore. We don't feel that sense of doom by saying that. So it becomes easier to make sustained changes, and actually, you can see physical changes in people as they go through the program, because things get easier, things get lighter, which is lovely.
Thank you for explaining that. That's it. It brings it more to life when you talk about it in that way. With the client that you were talking about, did you notice any physical changes in her through the 18 months that you were working with her?
Yeah, so because when we are kind of in this what's commonly known as fight or flight. So there's cortisol and adrenaline in our bodies, and our body is kind of pushing the resource to things like our muscles and the things that are required to help us survive. Often things like our digestive system, our reproductive system, our immune system are depleted of resources because they're not getting the same amount of resources they would normally if you were in a safe space, because they're not immediately required for our survival. So things like skin tone, stop saying
that word.
you know the one. Digestive issues. This person had a number of digestive issues, which were really supported to come off some certain medications. Now, that's obviously something that wouldn't be something that I would advise as a coach, because that isn't within my professional expertise. But as a result of changes, she was able to negotiate with her GP changes to her medication. So we did see significant changes over time, just because her body was resourcing the areas that had resources pulled from them in the past. So, we do see, there's a lot of digestive issues, a lot of reproductive issues, and a lot of this is due to us living in a chronic stress, which is kind of the world we live in. But stress is a kind of part of life, but it's about when we live in it constantly that causes us the most problems.
Thank you for that. I'm just thinking, if there's somebody watching this who's thinking, oh, but I'm not very in tune with my body, I'm not sure if that's for me, I like the idea of the outcomes that it might bring, but what would you say, what's your message to people who maybe don't feel as in touch with their body as others?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because a lot of time, especially if you've experienced trauma, and I don't necessarily just mean like the big T traumas, any types of trauma, is that we can become quite dissociated from our body, because it doesn't, it's much safer to stay in our heads. So I would say treat it as learning another language. You don't need to know to be able to speak fluently at the very beginning. There's a there's a technique called the felt sense meditation, which is part of the trauma release method, and it's a really gentle way of beginning to connect. So as the name suggests, it's a meditation, and it just begins to support you to get that curiosity, like, what is that sensation? What does that feel like if I breathe into that sensation? I'm not looking to change anything. We're really looking to be with. So that would be almost the very first thing I would start working with a client with, is give them the felt sense meditation and invite them to try that a few times. But yeah, I absolutely work with people who have said to me, I don't know what, when I say, how does that feel? But I don't know what you're talking about. I've got no idea what you're talking about. But using this, consistent over time has really helped them to begin to learn their body's language. So, it's a bit like you get the French guidebook, you begin to start looking into it. You begin to start having kind of conversations with it. It gets more interesting. You're more interested to try again. And that's how it, in my mind anyway, it builds, so that now when I wasn't very connected to my body at the beginning either, but now I can't really ignore it. Sometimes it's a little bit annoying, but if I'm speaking to someone, I will know what's theirs and what's mine, but I can sense what's going on in my body, which is really a powerful skill to have in life generally, if you can know what's yours and what's theirs, because we're social creatures, so it helps to navigate relationships if you can kind of sense how things are for people, and sometimes mitigate your behavior accordingly.
That sounds incredibly sophisticated. And I like the analogy of learning a language, because in the mind I was taking that further and thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great to become bilingual, so
Yes.
that I can, I can speak all languages, both in my head and my body, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I can understand both languages. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
The thing is as well, like it keeps things fluid as well, because if we ignore sensations and like just by not feeling them, essentially, we can hold on to them a lot more easily. And actually just feeling them allows it to process through and actually let go. So that's when I talk about that kind of lightness, that's what often people feel like. Well, I was feeling really sad, and I sat with that sadness for a bit as a sensation in my body, not about what it meant about me to be sad or judging the situation or blaming someone else. Just how does that sadness feel in my body? And then it processes through, which was one of the biggest magical things, I think. Your body can do it. Your body is always looking for balance. It'll be able to do it.
Fabulous. Thank you. Laura, I'm just keeping an eye on the time and wanting to give you some space to talk a bit about your Rebel Heart program. Is there anything you can share about that?
Yeah, well, actually, it's a good time because I was running it as a live program. So it was an 8-week program, and it kind of starts from the very beginning. So a bit like meeting people exactly where they are. But what is your nervous system? How does it work? It is for women. I am beginning to think about branching out for men as well, but there's a lot less information about the female nervous system. So I talk about how the hormonal cycles work with the nervous system, just so people can really understand their body. And then we begin to layer that on top of what's the goals? How do we begin to take consistent action? So I'm really passionate about it. And one of the things, as you have said, I work with busy people. And so what I'm trying to do just now is to develop it as a self-paced program. So it will still have some face-to-face online sessions, but maybe less of those and more self-paced learning. So I haven't launched it yet. So it's still kind of in the pipeline, but if people are interested in knowing a little bit more about it or a little bit more about me, if you sign up for my newsletter, which is on www.lauramartincoaching.co.uk, you can sign up for my mailing list and you get a lovely free guided meditation as part of that. And the soundtrack for that is by a dear friend of mine, Susie Soundsphere, who's an amazing sound healer. So even if you don't want to listen to my voice, listen to her music. It's amazing.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I shall sign up myself.
Yes, do that.
Now, there was something I wanted to ask you just to end, and it's gone out of my head. What can it be? Oh, what can it be? What you were talking about, your program. No, it's gone, Laura. I'm going to have to, if it comes to mind, I'll post something in the episode description.
Yeah. Good.
Is there any message that you want to? Oh, I know. I've just remembered what it was. Thank you, subconscious. It was about the whole notion about accessing the people that you're trying to reach. When you said busy, I was thinking, oh God, how actually do you manage to get people who don't recognize they're in a burnout situation to stop and take time to grab what you've got to offer?
So yeah, it's a good question. And to be honest, a lot of the time people work with me because they have identified that they can't go on the way things are, which, is the reality of kind of how we live our lives. I would love to start working with people at an earlier stage because I think, the potential there would be amazing. So I do, that's what I'm talking about a lot more on TikTok and things about actually how do you recognize when you might be living in nervous system regulation? So what are the signs, how you might be behaving, what you might be doing? And a lot of it is I'm doing things, and even if against what I've planned to do, I'm a huge amount of preparation into a meeting with my boss, and then I'm literally not saying what I want to say. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting on the sofa and I know I need to rest, but I'm just, writing my to-do list and off I go. So they're the kind of people that I want to.
Oops, looks like we've lost Laura. Laura, are you still there? No, it looks like we've lost her. Okay, well, there you see her, mid-flow.
Which, I think this is something that I think would be amazing to be teaching in schools, and maybe that's my next thing.
Fantastic. Laura, we just, I think it's cut out a bit and your image has frozen on my screen for the moment, but I can still hear you, which is the main thing.
Just a funny face on.
We have actually come to the end of time, and it has been an amazingly fascinating time to have you guesting on Case by Case. Before we go, Laura, and while we've still got your voice, could you please tell us you mentioned your website. Are there other ways that you can be contacted?
Yeah, website, or I'm on Instagram, Laura Laura_Martin Coach. I've got a TikTok now, Laura Martin Coaching. So yeah, find me on there, DM me. I do read everything myself, and I will respond if you've got any questions. But I guess key thing is, if this does resonate with you, you're not broken. Your nervous system is working exactly how it's supposed to do. So you just need to work out how to work with it. So I think that's just the most important message, that we are working perfectly as we're designed to. We just need tweaks.
Yes. What a lovely place to end. Thank you so much, Laura. And we can now see and hear you.
Hey,
It's great. So, yeah. Thank you so much, Laura, of Laura
Thanks.
Martin Coaching. Thank you to listeners and watchers. And if you like and see what you hear, no, if you like what you see and hear, please like, subscribe, and share. And do tell me what you want to hear more about in 2020 Coaching Convos with me, Julie Crabb. Till next time.